It's time for our Market Opportunities panel. So this panel will explore potential markets regarding plastic and water, from plastic alternatives to plastic recycling and reuse, towards new products, towards circular economy. And we will also discuss the ways that businesses can be both economically and environmentally sustainable. So at this point, I would like to introduce Mr. Alex Loucopoulos from Science Water, who will moderate the discussions of this panel.
Thank you, Patricia. Great to be here. It's an exciting panel. I think it's always tough to follow such an eloquent mayor talking about the impacts at the local community. And I think that to frame the conversation, yesterday talked a lot about the problems, some deep issues, and now I think today is really talking about the solutions and what are people doing about it. What are people doing about it at the state level, like the mayor talked about, the local level, and then also here from the business perspective, because it's one thing to frame the problem, it's another thing to actually go and do it. And I'm glad to have the various panelists here today. We have a very diverse group, which is, I think, reminiscent of the water space, where there isn't one profile, one solution. So I'll just let each of them briefly describe what they do and who they are. Maybe we'll start with Joe, sitting next to me here, coming from a very small water company called Xylem, and probably one of the more influential marketers in the business world in the water space. But let's just start here with Joe.
Great, perfect. Well, thanks, Alex, for that. And first I want to say thanks to MIT for putting on the panel and having us here. We're thrilled to be here, and this should be a great discussion today, that's for sure. I'll tell you a little bit about my background, and then what I'd probably do is any marketing person comes with some material. So I'd rather just play a video to tell you the story about Xylem for you to get a sense on that. But I lead marketing for the company. Now, originally I'm from Philadelphia, but it's great to come back to Boston. I lived here for about 6 years and did a lot of different things in the city. Went to BU across the river. I don't know if my grades were quite good enough to come to this institution, but it was always great to be on campus, that's for sure. And actually met my wife here and got married just down the street. So it's always got a good reminiscent of of a good time. So I lead marketing for the company, and that gets into your typical marketing activities, segmentation, pricing, branding, things like this. And again, we'll play a video for overviewing the company. But I also lead another kind of initiative focus for us, which is called Watermark. And Watermark is our philanthropic and employee stakeholder engagement program. We believe in stakeholder theory, not shareholder theory. You need to serve all stakeholders well. You need to understand them, understand their needs. And we really do that through the Watermark Initiative, which is really fulfilling. We have almost all of our employees engaged in a Watermark type activity, which is solving water in some way. We'll run over 1,000 events. We'll engage with, this year, over 3,000 stakeholders. So that's educating kids about water. It's building water towers in Cambodia, which we have customers and our team doing this year. It's cleaning waterways. So that's one big piece that we do that I'm very passionate about. In addition, we believe in bringing your authentic self to work. We do a lot of work around diversity and inclusion, totally committed to that, and unconscious bias training and things like this. So we do a lot of work, and I lean in that area. And last is I get involved with our sustainability initiative. We just launched a new sustainability strategy that we'll maybe talk a little bit more about later today. And that's a big commitment for the company. We're, everyone in this room, if you're in the water space, hopefully you were the first sustainable champion, and that's a big commitment. The last thing I'd say is, Xylem is also investing in MIT. We partnered with JWAFS, and JWAFS is a lab. We made an investment in 2016, and essentially we're thrilled to partner and get an insight on what PhD students are doing around solving some really tough challenges, if it's not in the AI space or disrupting pumping from changing volutes for how you maximize pumps at different head points, which could be a disruption for VFD. It's a lot of great work that a lab is doing there. Also looking at phosphate measuring phosphate in an in situ form, a really big disruptor again when you think about nutrients in water. So we're thrilled with the partnership. I'm always reminded, I have a technical background, but coming up here, I'm always reminded about why I went to marketing and did not pursue the technology field, because I'm always humbled when I talk to PhD students and students here in terms of the work that they're doing. So maybe with that, we'll run the quick video. I'll give you a highlight of what Xylem is all about. And we can just go from there. Great. So that sums up the company.
Fantastic, great video. Maybe Jess, you want to? I know you also have visuals, so
yeah,
go ahead.
One slide. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to MIT and everyone from the MIT Water Club for putting on such an awesome event, and you know, we're very excited to be a part of it. I'm the co-founder of Open Water, also the chief brand officer. We're a little bit smaller than Xylem. We have a team of 8 full-time people right now, so quite a bit smaller. And the company came about, Nicole is the other co-founder. She and I went to college together in Miami, and we ended up seeing a documentary on plastic pollution. And, you know, this was back in 2009. The conversation around plastics wasn't what it is now. But everyone still knows that it's a huge waste stream. It's a big issue in terms of pollution and conservation. And so we saw this documentary, and we left the theater kind of just in shock, seeing visually what the impact is. You know, 1,500 plastic bottles are used in the US every single second. 1 million are used globally every minute. And so we left the theater wondering why this product even existed. Obviously, the most sustainable solution, and one that should always be used first, is to use tap water in refillable bottles. But when we kind of dug into the research and looked at the market, we saw that wasn't curbing the plastic pollution issue. You know, it's a category, the bottled water market is a category that's grown every single year for the past 2 decades, and it's a matter of convenience. People don't always remember to bring their bottles with them. They don't have somewhere to fill it. They're at an event, at an airport. There's all these use cases where the product does serve a purpose, and so we said, what can we do to reduce the impact of that product while maintaining the same convenience? And so what that came down to was the material that it's packaged in. And so we started doing research on different materials. We looked at recycled plastics, plant-based plastics, glass, cartons, and really when we arrived at aluminum, it really was the clear winner in terms of the end-of-life prospects. It gets recycled nearly 70% of the time, which is, you know, more than double any of the other materials. It's also infinitely recyclable. So what that means is it can be used over and over again to create the same packaging forever. So it doesn't lose any volume or quality in the recycling process. And so we were naive college seniors, and we said, well, we can do this. No one's doing it, why not us? And so it ended up not being as simple as we thought it might be. We actually spent about 3.5 years doing research and development to actually create the product that we wanted to create. Nobody had used the aluminum bottle packaging for something that was non-carbonated and non-flavored. And so the process that was in place just didn't work for water. Obviously, there's nothing to mask any flavors or anything. And so at the end of 2014, we launched the still water in the 16-ounce bottles that hopefully most of you had a chance to see over the past 2 days. So that was the end of 2014. 2 years later, we launched a sparkling version in the same packaging. And then 1.5 years ago, so the spring of 2018, we launched a 12-ounce version of our still water as well. And honestly, it's been a very interesting experience. We've learned a ton. It's inspiring to see the conversation around plastics changing so much. When we first started, we would basically every morning pack up Nicole's car. You can fit 43 cases exactly and still be able to see out the rearview mirror. We would drive around the city and basically, you know, try to tell whoever would listen to our story, tell them our story and explain why aluminum was a more sustainable alternative and why they should stock that instead of plastic bottles. And the goal was to have an empty car by the end of the day. So that was 5 years ago, and now we're distributed nationwide. We work with some of the largest companies out there. We work with the Google offices. We work with some of the biggest hospitality players. We are distributed by US Foods and Cisco. So it's very inspiring to see that there's been a shift, and it's not just these companies who are circled just around sustainability that actually want to switch away from plastic. It's everyone. And there's a widespread shift as this conversation has become more mainstream. So we're excited to see what happens in the coming years.
Great, thank you. Maybe John, give us you have a very different background from the two on the podium here, so.
John Robinson, partner at Mazarine Ventures. We're a venture capital in the water and wastewater space. So we're doing what all VC does, find young companies, invest in them, help them grow, and then at some point we exit those investments. So we're creating value within the water ecosystem by finding talented young executives and getting them to the next level. Mazarine Ventures is based in Chicago, where I live. I got into water, just briefly, I got into water because I lived in China for 7 years, and that really opened my eyes on air and water pollution. And I thought, God, there's got to be some solutions to China's water problems. So I did a quick Google search. Well, in China, I had to go through a VPN to do the Google search, but I did a Baidu search. And a lot of the solutions to the world's water challenges were in the United States and Canada and Israel and Germany. And I thought, wow, this is an interesting area of technology that I hadn't thought about. I was in other industries prior to water. And I started to dig a little deeper, and so I started a consulting practice. For the last 10 years, I've been working in strategy consulting within water and wastewater, and then got together with a bunch of friends, and now we're investing into early stage companies. It's exactly companies like Open Water that we are identifying, and 5 years from now, the Open Waters of the world. There's another one in Chicago that we identified called Hydrate, which is a smart water bottle. And there's a number of other very creative solutions to water challenges that as VC, because we have a checkbook, a lot of these companies find us and they say we need some money to get to market. So we're the Xylems of the world, the Suez's, the Veolias, they see a lot of innovative stuff as well, and they have a lot of innovation. But as VC, our role in all this is to find these young executives and say, this is a good team, this is a good idea, put a little bit of money into it, and then after 3 or 4 years, the Xylems of the world can come in and say, this actually really is a good idea, let's take this to a broader audience. So we see this as an ecosystem of large corporate, financial capital, and entrepreneur. So this panel, it really represents the market opportunities and the players in the space.
Great, so just to echo that, clearly there's different perspectives here, but as we look to frame it, because I think oftentimes the discussion with water can go in many different directions because it literally is everywhere. Why don't we start with the question of why are people drinking bottled water and therefore plastic bottles? But I think the conversation should really start at that high level, and then we'll try to drill it down in terms of some of the solutions that specifically people on this panel are doing. But maybe start with you, John. Why are we in this predicament right now?
I think people are irrational. Human beings are irrational, including myself, about our decision making. We make decisions that are not always thought through because it's just impossible to have all the information. And we're drinking plastic bottled water because we think it's somehow safer than the tap water. So that just gets right to the heart of it, is people just don't know the quality of their tap water. It's just not available. It's not democratized. And so they're saying, well, I just get the bottled water because it's safer. So they're making decisions without all the information. So one of the areas that we're most interested in as VC is water quality data. It's out there. It's just not at your fingertips as a consumer. You live in Boston, you live in LA, you live in Philly. You just sort of, I'm a tap water person, I'm fine, or I'm a bottled water person, but people are making decisions on their hydration without any data. So if that data was available, how would that affect your decision making? And if you had a score on your tap that said, actually my water is much cleaner than I thought, you know what, honey, let's just drink tap water. It seems like it's good. Let's stop buying all this bottled water. So people will make smarter decisions. So as investors, one of our primary areas of focus is realizing that vision where every household in America can have confidence, or if they do find that their water quality is poor, what are my solutions for increasing the quality of water? So point of use or point of entry technologies. But it all begins with knowing what your own water quality is. And that's just households, but what about schools? What about companies? Are my employees drinking contaminated water? So the market, and because we're talking about market opportunities and we're talking about plastic, the market opportunity for water quality data and delivering that to our phones and to our email inboxes is bigger than almost anything else we can think of. And so as VC, that's a point that I want to make. So if anybody's interested in water quality data and the business opportunities around it, that might be a good starting point.
Joe, how does Xylem view that?
Well, first of all, I totally agree with what John just said. I mean, I think that's there's a lot there, and I'll give maybe an example that we were sort of involved with as well. But we got to take a step back and look at the way we think about or frame it up at times is the bottled water industry is around, call it 30 billion. Just to put it in perspective, right, about $30 billion, somewhere in that ballpark. And when you look at all the plastic bottles out there, about 40% of all plastic bottles are, water, as opposed to some other, liquid or drink in there. So that's kind of the size of the prize. And there's been a lot of studies out there that say, well, why people adopt bottled water, and it's about as high as 90 when they lack quality and they're not trusting the water, they don't think it's safe. And so that's one of the drivers. Convenience is another driver, and there's a great place for that as well. So we just don't believe everything should go away. We love this product, by the way. Don't think everything should go away. But really, when you think about it, 90% of the behavior is driven by lack of trust. So when you put that back into dollars, it's basically $27 billion is being spent because folks don't trust tap water. And about a third of all plastic bottles out there are there because people don't trust tap water, right? That's the size of the prize. To put that in perspective a little bit, that $27 billion, that's equivalent. Right now, there's a gap in water infrastructure investment. The EPA runs this every 20 years. And it's around 13 billion. So it's twice the gap. If we can somehow improve the trust in tap water and divert that money, you could more than fill the gap today. You don't have to put new money into the system. In fact, it's already there. That's one way to think about it. Another way to think about it is, what if you went to every utility and said, whatever your OpEx, your operating budget is, whatever it is, we'll double it. We'll double it. Because that number is about equal to what the U.S. municipal OpEx is in the United States. It's about 30 billion, 35 billion. It's close enough for marketers' math, if you will, right? And so that's what's at stake. That's what you don't need a lot of new money to come into the system, but you got to work on this trust issue and really work on that. And so the way we think about it is a couple ways that we partner with utilities on this piece. One, the message matters, and there's a lot of work in this area around how you message about water and the quality of water. You really can't use the word treat. Consumers think treat is adding chemicals to the water. That is not a driver of adoption. Clean is the right word, not treat. So there's a lot of these examples around what's the best way to message about the quality of water. That's number one. The messenger also matters, right? And trust in the messenger. And there's a lot of utilities that we're working with, some in Florida and California, that are tapping into the local healthcare system and doctors promoting the quality about tap water and the safety in tap water. Because doctors are one of the most trusted messengers or entities in society today, right? And so think about the message, think about the messenger, right? Think about transparency. This is John's point. We worked with a big customer of ours in Korea, K Water. They worked on this quite a bit, and they deployed smart sensors and technologies in, I want to say the town was Punju, somewhere like, I'm probably mispronouncing. the town. But they did the study there, and the adoption of local drinking water was about 1%. Terrible. Now, when they deployed smart sensors and software, they real-time shared that data with the community. The adoption went up to 35%. Now, that's still dramatically lower than what it needs to be, but it's John's point around behavior changes when you drive up transparency. So that's a big deal. And K-Water, you can read about that. If you Google IWA and K-Water, you can read about what this customer of ours is really doing. Another piece is not surprising coming out of my mouth, brand, right? Brand matters. Brand matters. And so branding tap water or branding even reuse, which you might get into as well, matters. You see this in Singapore. They're branding their municipal water. You see it in San Diego. It's purified water. They're branding the water. That matters. Municipalities adopting more branding and marketing techniques really is important. Last point is education. Education. If you ask folks in Singapore who have a dramatic adoption not only of water but on reuse, if you ask them, why do you adopt, why do you trust? The answer is, I learned about that in the 3rd grade. 2nd and 3rd grade, I learned what was going on, and I built trust at that point in time. So educating youth and getting after it matters. Also opening up your facility. You see a lot of municipalities now, they have kind of open house, and they bring a lot of groups through to see the technology. If you understand the technology and how it works, then you can drive up the trust. So those are the kind of the 5 points that we work with a lot of different municipalities on to drive up trust, higher adoption of tap water, lower usage of bottled water. What we haven't kind of figured out is how do you really then get after that $27 billion and divert it? That's a pricing discussion, and that's one way to really get after it. But that's how we think about it. These are big numbers, it matters, but you don't need a lot of new inputs into the system to really get after it.
Great. Jess, maybe you can talk a little bit about how do you approach trust at Open Water, and how do you view brand, and how important is all that? Because I would very much agree that it does start with trust and the inability to do that. And Singapore is a perfect example. I mean, they call this Singapore water, toilet to tap.
Wet to be water, yeah.
Right. Yeah. But how do you approach it from the entrepreneur perspective?
Sure. So to go back to your original question about why people drink bottled water in the first place, I would echo both what John and Joe said about data availability around the safety of tap water and making sure that trust exists. I think that there's 2 other pieces to it as well. So one is the convenience factor, which is hard to put a value on in some cases. There's a large portion of people who do drink tap water at home and then buy bottled water when they're out. And so dealing with that piece and changing human behavior is obviously a very difficult one. I think the other big driver of bottled water sales is people who are switching to healthier options. So in 2017, bottled water surpassed the carbonated soda market for the first time ever, which signifies a shift from this unhealthy sugary beverage full of calories to something that is healthier. So there's all these different pieces that go into it. As far as trust, we try to be as authentic as possible in all of our messaging. First and foremost, we always advocate for the use of tap water and reusable bottles whenever possible, which may seem counterintuitive for a lot of bottled water brands. It's not messaging you usually hear from them, if ever. But it's something that we make sure to call out on pretty much everything that we do. It's right on our website. And then the other piece is that so the water in our bottles, it's purified water with minerals added. We don't think that water needs to be imported from Fiji or from other places. That water is not necessarily any better than the water that we have locally, and that all ties into our sustainability mission. So our intent is to bottle as close as where we distribute as possible.
One thing that's always on my mind is, and clearly when you're talking about market opportunities, and we have a bottled water company, a large water tech business, what is the price of water? And have we underpriced it in the U.S.?
I have an answer to that. It's free. Delivery of it, not so much. So when you get an energy bill, it says generation, $25. Transmission, $25. $22. It's separated on my energy bill. For my water bill, it should be water free. It falls from the sky, it's in the lake, it's under the ground, it belongs to everybody. Delivery of water to your home, $6.99. I will pay that all day long. I don't know how to legislate that. I don't know if leadership would be interested in that, but of course it's free. The delivery of clean water to my home, it's reasonable to any human being to be like, of course there's a cost to get it to me. That's reasonable. And so I think that if we can go to that direction where you're paying for the transmission, I think that any sane person would agree to pay for that.
So really communicating that it's not the water, it's the
So
transmission
then you
that goes along
satisfy
with
the
it.
UN mandate that water is a human right. So that's never going to change. That's already out there. Water is a human right. It's free. It's just educating the transmission of it requires pumping and cleaning. And to Joe's point, education. So there's a movie coming out in a few weeks called Dark Water, Joe Ruffalo, and it's going right after 3M and all these other, like the PFAS stuff. So if you haven't heard of it, you're at this conference, you're obviously interested in PFAS. It's called Dark Water. I think it comes out in 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah. Oh, it's already out, but maybe not in or maybe it's already out. Okay.
It's out in theaters and it's starring Mark Ruffalo
Ruffalo, yeah.
and Tim Robbins.
So everyone should see that. But more of those movies would raise awareness. And I think sports is an excellent, Joe and I were talking earlier, athletes are out there on the field, whether it's the Olympics, which is coming up next year, or World Cup, or just your local sports team. Those athletes need tons of water to perform. Those athletes should be on the team saying, for me to hit peak performance, I need clean water. What are you doing at home? Tap water, and maybe it's the star of the Boston Red Sox drinking tap water and say, I drink tap water. And all the kids at home would be like, wow, this is great. Our tap water is actually really good. And it just elevates awareness. So education and awareness, I think, is a good and important part of it.
Yeah, I mean, on the pricing issue, it's not a. I think John said it well. You know, the mechanism for getting after price, the dollar per gallon, is kind of the transfer function for usage, if you will. But how you message what you're really paying for is the treatment, transporting water, treating it, and having good quality. So I think there's definitely, and that's where some folks are trying to get to. I think that's one piece. I think there's another piece, though, that says a lot of utilities actually don't cover their operating costs today. And that's why there's a muni bond market. That's why there's other avenues for cash, right? Because it's one business model that actually doesn't pay for itself, because it doesn't, at some utilities, many utilities actually, they don't bring in enough cash. And so there is this pricing issue that you could look for maybe changing in prices. And again, if we were really, the ability to pay is already there. We talked about the $27 billion and transferring that. So that's one way to kind of get after it. But there's no silver bullet in water. So, having said that, right, with some areas, yes, you need to increase price because you're not covering your cost. And the cost is giving you good, reliable, quality water, right? And so that makes sense. But we also are very sensitive. 20% of U.S. households in this country, mostly in rural areas, they have 20% of their take-home pay goes to the water bill. Now, that's too much. So in some areas, mostly rural, right, that is too high. And that is an affordability issue. And so we advocate, again, it's not like one answer. You need to look at different areas and geographies and understand and be sensitive to the right pricing. But in some areas, and that study is out there by, I think, the U.S. Water Alliance, that's a reality, and that's too high. So, in one regard, we talk about an affordability issue, and in another regard, we talk about, kind of getting after prices to kind of plug a hole in an operating model that goes to the very nature of delivering a good quality product for customers. So it's not easy, but in some areas it needs to go up. In other areas, it actually needs to go down. And the way to do that is one area is to deploy a lot of technology to create economics to get after that. But that's how we think about price.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. First and foremost, access to clean, healthy water needs to be a right. It is a right, and it needs to be available widely to everybody. I think that there's multiple parts to the solution to diminish our reliance on plastics. Obviously, we believe that part of that solution is, offering products and materials that are more likely to be recycled. Interestingly, the recycling of aluminum is actually what allows the the recycling of other materials. So the curbside recycling programs are funded by the collection of metals, and that comes down to the fact that plastics have very low scrap value. There's not an incentive otherwise for the recycling companies to collect them. So there's a bunch of different pieces, and obviously access to clean water for everybody is a priority, but there's other pieces as well.
Right. So we've talked about trust, we've talked about communication and the importance of it, which I think is a very, it's a nuanced point that, just to echo what John said, is it's the price of water, but it's specifically the price of the transmission distribution of water. So moving on to kind of what are the solutions, what are the market opportunities? From where I sit, we focus pretty much on the infrastructure piece of this, which underpins a lot of it. But maybe starting with you, John, what do you see as the opportunities? You've mentioned detection. Maybe you can talk a little bit about removal and how you view data as a
So I'm pulling up my phone not to text somebody, but we're really excited because market opportunities. We're really excited about smart home. So a survey I read recently said 1/3 of Americans either already have smart home or plan to buy a smart home device next year. So your Nest thermostat, a light, a lock, a camera. I mean, these Ring things, these cameras in your backyard, your front yard, these are cheap nowadays. You go to Home Depot, get one for like $80, less even. So what about water in the smart home? Yeah, what about water? People are asking this question. So I went to a smart home conference recently, and people are increasingly have their locks, lights, thermostats, all smart. And so there are companies monitoring water flow, and we have one on our house, and I know exactly how much, I'm not at home now, but I know, I live in Chicago, I know how much water was used this morning already. And you can disaggregate it, and you can get more visibility into usage. And you can put a dollar sign on exactly how much water was used this morning, 8 cents, it's pretty cheap. But once you start to become, I don't watch this all the time, the novelty of like, oh, we use this much water, the novelty wears off after a couple times looking at it. But there's awareness in my house of how much water's used. And then it begs the question, what else can I do in my house relating to water? So there's a lot of opportunities in the house, starting with the kitchen sink. So the journey of homeowners towards Nest, and you say, hey, we got a Nest, we can control our thermostat, we can control our lighting when we're gone. It's a convenience thing, but it's also a security thing. The journey continues on to water. And so I think all of us in the next 5 years, the ability to monitor your water use in your home is now pretty cheap. And once you're aware that you're using 25 gallons, and then this one actually does another interesting thing. If there's anomalies in our water use, the toilet's been running at 1 gallon a minute for the last 2 hours, that's not normal. So there's your data science stuff. So the data science machine learning will detect truth set, and then an anomaly, ding, something's wrong. And maybe there's leaking water, which is bad. So my summary of this is, in terms of market opportunities, we see a huge opportunity in the smart home and the smart building to leverage some of this network connectivity and monitoring that you use for lights and locks and thermostats to get into the water space to allow all of us to have better management and functionality of water. And one final point is on hot water. I know this is about plastics, but of all of our energy use in our home, hot water is like so expensive. And it's in the closet down the hall, and you've got a 50-gallon A.O. Smith water heater. People don't think of that, but you're just throwing money at hot water every month, and it's heating it. And so there's a lot of opportunities to get smart around water in the home. And our bet as investors in the next 5 years that all of us will start to incorporate more smart water stuff in our home. And the journey begins with how much water am I using today? And then you eventually get into quality and hot water. So that's one area as investors we're looking at.
Joe, I know you guys have clearly a lot of markets you play in. Any particular you want to highlight in terms of what Xylem is looking at and maybe more on the treatment side or the removal side?
Yeah, so we work around the world on a lot of different issues. But when we think about, I think we're early in the game when it comes specifically on plastics, or bring it back to plastics. I think we're early. There's a lot of emerging contaminants out there. I think this film actually, Dark Waters, that we just got done talking about, is going to accelerate a lot of work in Washington and other places around looking at PFAS in that example, but the emerging contaminant category and microplastics being one element in there. So I think it's going to accelerate, which is really good. It's the right thing to go do. But we would also recognize it's really early. At the federal level, there's not a lot of kind of like triggers, pushes, if you will, from a regulation or even guideline, actually point of view, guidelines to sample, guidelines to test, guidelines to treat. So I think we need more in that area to help folks find a way. California is certainly out there from a state point of view, but I think we could use more in that space. But like most of these things, this is not a technology challenge. Water is really more of an acceptability, an education, a trust issue. It's not a technology challenge. The technology is actually quite kind of understood and used. It's just a matter of deploying the technology where and when you need it. For microplastics, as an example, membranes, reverse osmosis, MBRs, membrane bioreactors, even sand filtration, those technologies exist. They remove plus 95, 98, 99% of microplastics. It's just a matter of, is there a trigger to deploy that technology? Sometimes there is, but many times there isn't. And unfortunately, a lot of folks around behavior change, they need a trigger to actually deploy the technology. So we would advocate for looking at the contaminant group collectively, advocate for more triggers, if you will, but the technology is there. So we do a lot of work from a education perspective on different state and in Washington and other capitals around the world to really educate and help folks understand issues around water. And what legislatively or regulatory-wise you can do to really push the behavior change to get after that, and that's sometimes what it takes. So we do a lot of that work, but from a technology point of view, we've got some. We don't have all the technology, but other technology providers out there, it's kind of already here and can really get after the issue.
Here's an opportunity for Xylem and Mazarine to collaborate on something, and maybe MIT. So the holy grail of quality monitoring is a real-time sensor in the tap. Why can't we just have a chemistry lab in my tap at home to monitor lead, PFAS, mercury, arsenic? People always ask me, can I just put something in the thing and just monitor this stuff and I get a thing? It's like, oh, I get stuff. That's 10, well, if MIT's involved in it, maybe 8 years away. But that's really hard to take a chemistry lab and put it into your faucet and you get an alert that says, ooh, mercury just spiked. It just is not, it's just Star Trek. You can't do it. And so you can monitor for one thing really well. You can do a lead sensor, but those things drift over time. You got to calibrate the thing, you got to get in there. So we're still a few years away from real-time quality monitoring. So the plan B is the labs. There's hundreds of water quality labs around the country. Have you ever reached out to a water quality lab? Their customer acquisition sucks. Sorry, I can't think of a better word. They're not designed to CX. Like, they're not designed to work with a single family home. I just want to test my water. You go to Home Depot, you get a test strip. Chlorine, it's high. Hardness, it's high. What else can I test? They don't sell a chemistry lab. You call the Culligan guy to your house, he's gonna come over and test some things. He's like, well, here, you think this $4,000 unit to point it back. They're gonna try and sell you something. So it doesn't feel very genuine. So we think the nut to crack here is to get the labs into the 21st century so that our homes, I can call a lab and say, I just want to test my water. Can I send you a sample and send it back? You still have to do the grab sample and send it back. Make that as painless as possible. That's a nut that's crackable right now. And we feel like the real-time quality testing, if I can throw that challenge out to MIT to figure out how to do that, that's a combination of the chemistry labs, the biology labs, the data science labs, and if we can call that the 10-year MIT challenge, that's something that Xylem and Mazarine would welcome the opportunity to be involved in those conversations.
Yeah, I actually just had a conversation earlier today with just that. There's a project going on looking at lead, point of use, lead and removing lead, and it was fascinating that the work is already happening here at MIT. So it's really great to see those things happening. So exciting stuff.
Great. I'm glad we're now moving into concrete, actual market opportunities, which I think is a head start well and beyond many kind of panels on water and market opportunities, and I think that's part of the issue. But bringing it down to simplicity. But more specifically, Jess, maybe because you're really doing something very specific as well. Maybe tell us a little about where you want to take open water and what you see the future once you build out the distribution, once you build out the trust in the consumer. What's your view on it going forward?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, we started this company to eliminate the need for as many plastic bottles as possible. I think that there's a really big disconnect between the consumer of the plastic bottle and what happens next. So we've had the conversation, hundreds of times where people tell us, but I recycle my plastic bottles. They don't know what happens after they throw it into their blue bin, and they don't think about it. They don't take any responsibility for the actual consumption because they did what they think is the right thing. In order to have an impact, more companies need to look at their supply chain, that's manufacturers and also retailers, and figure out ways to reduce plastics as much as possible. Obviously, the way that we think is a good way to do it, or one of the ways to do it, is to find other materials that are better options. Coke and Pepsi also announced recently that they're doing something similar in a can, and so it's exciting to see that there's pressure being put on the companies, these big corporations, to change what they've been doing for tens of years, and often at a cost to them as well. The other side of that is that consumers need to understand that plastic is cheap. Alternatives will be more expensive. And so if it's something that they care about, they're going to have to compromise and be willing to spend a few cents more on each unit that they buy, or there's multiple pieces to creating that change, and the corporations need to do their part, the retailers need to do their part, and the consumers do as well. In the future, obviously, we want to eliminate as many of these plastic bottles as possible. The way to do that is to, get the distribution across the country, across the globe, and make these products accessible, not only physically, but also from a monetary price standpoint, accessible to as many people as possible. And then, at the same time, continue to advocate for tap water whenever possible.
I'm just disappointed you didn't bring the sparkling ones. Sparklings are so good. You don't have those with you, do you?
No, I don't have them with me.
The last time you had the sparkling ones, they're delicious. Although you gotta be careful when you open them, because you're opening water. You're like, oh, it's water.
Yeah.
Kind of gets all over you a little bit. So you gotta be careful. You maybe put a warning.
Don't shake.
Because people are not used to opening water and having it.
Well, I have to say, though, it's so great hearing your story, Jess, and the purpose-driven company that you started and pursued with your partner is just really inspiring. So it's, I'm humbled here to just hear all the good work that you're doing. It's really, really good stuff.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, great story.
Now, I think now we've established the market, the problem, some of the solutions. Maybe starting with you, Joe, and I know you've done some interesting stuff with communications and specifically with certain sports teams. Why don't you tell us about the challenges of actually executing on the some of the solutions and what you guys have done, and specifically some of the more interesting, cooler things that you've done that you want to share with the group?
Yeah, I mean, we about, maybe it was like 2 years ago, and I'm fortunate to have our CEO is just, he is a really special leader, and he is all in on this purpose-driven, why we come to work every day, trying to solve water issues, and he's a really special person. And we were kind of ideating on, this issue of water, as we all know, doesn't break through. We're looking for the Got Milk campaign. I applaud the dairy industry 5, 7, 10 years ago, whatever it was. Their message broke through, right? The Got Milk was great. And we were talking about, water's tried and it just, hasn't really gotten there for a number of different reasons. And he put a challenge to our team that said, kind of try to, figure this out. I'll say that I'm a much more like a data-driven approach to certain things than where my personal passion from certain platforms might lie. And we looked at the math and the data, and when we look at it, we were trying to solve for a global platform. We needed a global, reach, and 40% of all humans on the earth are fans or follow soccer, which now equals football. Okay, so I'll use football from a version, but it's the international football, so soccer here. 40%, which we were quite stunned about. And when you look at football and you look at different leagues, and you can look at any kind of marketing reach number, they're all like trading the same. TV viewership is one, but everyone is really the same. The Premier League, which is the league in the UK, really has about 3.2 billion people following Premier League. You might be watching it on Saturday morning now. The next biggest platform was UEFA, which was the European League, around 2.8 billion. The NBA, as a comparison, is about 1 billion. And so we said this football thing is big. It's quite passionate. The Premier League seems to be the biggest platform that we could go after. Yeah, if you just put a poll, yeah. And so then we looked at within the Premier League, which clubs would we essentially potentially partner with, and we interviewed all of them, at least the top 6. And for us, Manchester City was a great fit. Manchester City is trying to change the world through football. They have a big community commitment. We have a belief of changing the world through water. And so a great overlap on our value system, and the club was a great kind of co-creator of content at the same time, which is something we wanted. And so what we want to do, the purpose is to elevate the conversation about water, to get it to break through to the general public. We're not we will never see any of our technologies not selling anything here. It's really about raising the awareness, number one, and then talking about solutions, things that people can go do, or different ways of getting after it. So what I'd like to show is our first kind of kickoff clip that we made with some of the star, Sergio Aguero. If you follow football, this is probably the rock star in the global football world, and how we use the team to get our first kickoff on an awareness campaign. So if you want to hit that, please go ahead. So that was the club loved it. That was the one campaign that the club put their own money behind when they had won. And there's big brands that partner with the club. And we were very welcoming and humbled that they reached out to us to activate this campaign, which was really exciting. So it's had a great runway, and these are some of the things that we're trying to do to get the issue of water, elevate that conversation, get more people educated about this issue, and then maybe the willingness to pay goes up. Maybe the understanding packaging and choosing to purchase this product over a typical product, right? If more people are aware and understanding these issues, we believe we can just get after this in a bigger way. And so this is some of the work that we're trying to do.
It's great, fantastic, and I kept hearing one thing over and over again, which is passion, sustainability, and raising the conversation. And I think what you guys have done, putting together between Heineken, sports, and water is great. And I think it's frankly just the beginning, because the conversation hasn't been there, but needs to be there, and it's companies like Xylem and you guys here as well. Would you like? Obviously, you can't sponsor a multi-$100-million sports team, but you guys have your own passions. I know John in particular. Is there anything you would like to highlight? Because
I think this is the beginning, Xylem. This is the beginning of the next few years. I can imagine Lululemon. You think of health. You think of Lululemon. You get sick. Where do you go? You go to Walgreens. You go to CVS. I think the tie-in between water and health. Nike, you go running, you go to the gym, you wear Nike, Adidas. So those brands, the creative marketing people at the top of those organizations need to somehow tie water to their messaging. And I've squarely put this on the Walgreens and the CVSs of the world. You go to Walgreens when you get sick, you're looking for healthy things, they give you plastic bottles of white. It's crazy. Walgreens needs to be all over this. Lululemon needs to be all over this. Nike should be all over this. And I think Xylem is sort of open to the doors that it's okay for water companies to go outside of water, and I think it's okay for non-water companies to get into the water business. And so that's my first sort of point, is I think that the marketing in the next few years is an interesting opportunity to raise awareness, so I'm excited to see where this all leads. The other point that I'd like to make is in terms of market opportunities. I mentioned this a little bit last night in my remarks. You solve energy, you solve water. Imagine if energy was free. You would desalinate the ocean like crazy and deliver clean water to people around the world. You put desal plants all around Africa. You reuse water over and over and over and over again. Only if energy is cheap. So I saw the news the other day about Bill Gates and his new concentrated solar company. They're bringing the cost of energy down. The very first thing you do is you go after water. And to push water through membranes requires tons of energy. So the key to solving water, I think, is actually on the energy side of the business. So if there's a university that's good at energy and engineering, I think it might be MIT, but I think the energy guys and the water guys need to get together and figure out a little bit more on this. You can't have a meaningful conversation about water without talking about energy, and going the other way, you can't have a meaningful conversation about water without talking about energy, and energy without water. So I think that is a market opportunity for investors and corporates to really bring this to a whole nother level.
Maybe how are you bringing your passion and your views on water to the investment community, which is a little different than the mass market? Maybe you can talk about how you're approaching families and your investors.
You know what investors sit up straighter in their chairs for is data science, not digital. The word digital is a little confusing, but you say data science innovations, people sit up in their chairs a little bit straighter. Like, oh, there's tech here. It's Bay Area, Silicon Valley kind of stuff. It's AI, it's machine learning. They're like, oh, where's my checkbook? I want to invest in tech, which is essentially data science. And so if you say water, people say, their eyes glaze over and they slouch in their chairs. So in order to get people excited, you've got to talk about data science, material science, microbiology, and chemistry, and people sit up in their chairs straighter. You say water, unfortunately, today, people's eyes glaze over. So our ability to raise awareness in the investment community is ironically not talking about water, but talking about energy and data science. People, just human beings, it's more tangible on magnitudes of order. Energy, you turn the light on, you turn it off, you understand that. And data science is just investment grade. Look at all the money that's been made in data science related innovations. So the Wall Street responds to energy and responds to data science. And water's not quite there yet, but after these campaigns that you're rolling out, maybe Wall Street will wake up and say, actually, there is an opportunity here. But in the near term, it's data science and energy are triggers to free up more dollars into this space.
Yeah, I would very much agree. I think water is driving the passion in this room. Everyone wants to solve these problems. Everyone is, there's a reason you're not in a software conference on a Friday morning. You're here because you feel strongly about the issues. You're passionate people. It's taking that water passion, let's say, and messaging it and trying to bring those problems to solutions, not in the framework of water, because water is sports, water is health, water is consumer goods. Water is across the globe. Water is not just a Boston issue. It's not a Baton Rouge issue. So I think it's harnessing that passion that starts with water, and the solution will end with water. But it's the intermediary steps, I think, where the positioning is being lost, because the market is so big and broad. Because everything I've heard everyone talk about, we can search and replace it with, if we were at a data scientist conference. But the water is the passion, and I think that's what makes everything different. For me personally, to be in the water space, and what I would think people here at MIT who are at the leading edge of technology and sustainability and the movement of doing more good for the world is frankly no better forum to kind of start that 10-year conversation, which again, in our view, and I think everyone would agree, it's really just beginning. There is no reason we're sitting here in 5 years or 10 years, this isn't 3 times as many people, hopefully, but not just water is the overarching theme, and that's what's brought everyone together, but the solutions and the people in the room and the people talking about it could be sports athletes, could be technologists, could be health professionals. There's absolutely no reason for that. And clearly, I think the three of you and many of the panelists previously and feel that way. And hopefully we can see that emerging here at the MIT Water Conference, which I fundamentally think should be the center of a lot of that conversation in the years to come. So I don't know, I think we have about 15 minutes left. I'm sure there's a few questions for our esteemed panelists here on very different topics. But really keep the passion going. There is no one solution. There is no one face of water. But the reality is water will continue to penetrate every single part of everyone's life. And we need to solve a lot of these problems. And we need to solve them soon. So.
I have a question to both John and
Joe. So, John, you were saying about your campaign with Manchester. Why not put it on national TV? This is how you gain. If you look at the UK, they have a very high awareness of heart attacks and defibrillators in, public spaces because it's always on their news. And whenever you have a break on prime time, you will have that as a commercial. And then goes the question to John. Don't you think that your audience, the investor audience is obviously people who are, looking for high tech and, the large words. But your actual consumers are people who like the simple words. They need you to give them very simply the facts. And fact of the matter, even professors at MIT are sometimes unaware of how New England is disrespecting the fact that it has a lot of water or, relatively a lot of clean water, while the other coast of the US doesn't. And you can see high difference even with highly educated people about their knowledge of how to handle properly the limited source we have in this world.
Actually, California has a lot of water. They don't have a water problem, they have a policy problem. And policy problems are government problems, and government problems are character problems.
Northern California has
Yeah.
Southern receives from other states with a contract, and they actually pay highly for that contract.
They waste so much water on ag. It's a policy issue.
So don't you think the people are the actual consumers? Because they are the actual people.
So here's
who
one
use.
innovation, and I'll let Joe answer the question. Here's one innovation. We invested in a company called Simple Water. They have a product called Tap Score. And so traditionally, if you want to get your water quality tested in Boston, you get a water quality report, parts per billion, parts per billion, parts per trillion, all these periodic table things you can't even pronounce. This guy in Oakland that we invested in, he said, this is crazy. You need to do this on a 1 to 100 scale. That's what people understand from school. I got a score. So it's called Tap Score. You grab your water, you send it to him, you get back a score. You got a 77, you got a 93, you got a 52. And people are like, wow, that seems low. And all of a sudden, you got a conversation going in your head. So it's putting it in a language that people understand. Instead of parts per billion of magnesium, it's actually, you got a 79.6. And here's some options for you to increase it. So it's democratizing water quality testing. So the average person can say, I need to do something about this. I got a low score. And whose fault is that? It doesn't matter whose fault it is. I just need to fix it for my family. But I think in terms of quality and households, it's innovations like that that's making it easier for people to understand that they have a problem and they can solve it. On the quantity side, as I showed before on this app, it's monitoring how much water you use every day. That wasn't available 10 years ago, 5 years ago, to monitor your flow in your home. At least it wasn't cheap. But nowadays, for $100 or less, $50, you can see exactly how much water you're using. And so these inventions have put water in the language that the average person can understand. A score of 1 to 100, and how many gallons you used this morning. So those are some innovations that are actually bringing it down to the average person. So I'm excited about those developments. 20, 30 years ago, they were not available. Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for the question. I think the way that we're thinking about this, we always refer to it as a partnership, not this sponsorship, because it's really this kind of shared belief to drive behavior change. We're first investing in content. Again, just to put it in perspective, so we're a B2B kind of technology products company. For us to kind of even start flexing this kind of muscle is totally new for us, totally new, right? And to engage with this kind of marketing machine that Manchester City has is really helped us quite a bit. But the first thing is investing in really good content, and we're trying to do that. We just looked at season 2, which is coming up now. It's going to have some fantastic pieces of content. and players drinking water and doing a whole bunch of things that we're going to get after. So the first thing was get their content right. The second piece was get it distributed in a big way. Traditional TV viewership actually is kind of going down. And online is rapidly rising, and everyone's got a smartphone, and everyone's engaging. So we like that channel first, and we can also track engagement. We can have conversations with the audience with that channel. So we're not quite there on kind of traditional TV. I don't know if we will get there. We like the content and the current distribution channels, which is mostly online, social, and owned media as well. And we'll get the earned media, people talking about it. And look, at the end of the day, there's 400+ million fans that's our target audience. Our target audience are those 400 Manchester City global fans. And if we can change their behavior, then we think there's a multiplier effect after that. And we really run on Man City channels basically to reach them. That's the main channel. We'll use our own channels, but that's the main channel. And that's been the strategy so far.
Joe, I have a creative suggestion for you and Jess to work together. So imagine this bottle, you white label it for Manchester City. Yeah. What if it had the logo on it, so it didn't say open water anymore, maybe in the back, but it said Manchester City Players Water in partnership with Xylem and Open Water. And those people in the audience, like, this is the water the players drink. Yeah. And people buy it, they go to the grocery store in Manchester City, and they're drinking Players Water. I think that'd be an interesting marketing campaign between your two organizations and Manchester that could be good for everybody involved. And bringing it down to the average person who's at home, and the kid's like, Mom, I want Players Water. Yeah. That still avoids the tap water problem. Yeah. But it's better than a plastic bottle. So.
If I can just highlight two things on this. It's an amazing in an industry, and this is what makes water so unique, is you have a B2B business that is driving consumer awareness and driving the conversation. You have a venture capitalist firm that is driving the conversation and part of the conversation along with other constituents, but driving the conversation about water. I don't think there's any other industry in the world where you have constituents like that who are traditionally not part of that, and not certainly part of it, but not driving it. So that's a testament, I think, to water, and I think that's what makes it so exciting and interesting. Go ahead.
You may go first. Oh, okay, cool. Hi, my name is Timothy Aaron Medina. I have a question specifically about when you're making a prototype that can be invested into. When you're speaking about data science, energy, and water, and combining all three together, you get actual marketing opportunity. My question is it a wise decision that when you're actually marketing your product, you should actually know how much water and energy you're using?
I think that'd be an interesting marketing campaign for a Whirlpool or an Amana or like a dishwasher washing machine. Mm-hmm. They already have energy use on there, but water use is not really on there. And so I think that, that would be an excellent marketing campaign to remind people that this product uses 20% less water. Even Joe, on the industrial side, this pump versus that pump, what's the difference? This one's blue, this is red? No, this one uses less energy. Right. To move the same amount of water, the same difference. So they already are using data to drive sales. And so any product coming to market, water, what do they call it? Virtual water? Virtual water within products. So to make this paper cup, probably used a couple gallons of water for this one cup. Now, I don't know if on the marketing campaign, if you want to put that stuff on here, but certainly some people in the audience or some people, consumers, would like to know how much water is in this. Just like on the back of some food products, you've got your nutrition guide. This just gets into legislation and the government to sort of mandate that every product has to have how many gallons of water were used to make this thing. I hope we get there.
Would it be cool that using that label where we have our nutrition values to actually build vulnerability and transparency between customer and whoever is making the product? Would that be like a good decision?
It just gets into policy and legislation, which is where Seth yesterday would be a great advocate for that stuff.
Cool. Thank you.
But I agree. We're really going for outcome-based messages, because sometimes folks, they don't care how they're able to do what they want to do. They just care that they're able to do what they want to do, right? And the tools, especially high technology, they're going to change quite often, very often, right? And so there's some piece of trust at a high level here that it's actually working, but what can you actually go do? We were really down that path when it comes to messaging. Outcome-based messages is where we really like to go. So right to your point.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
So hi, I'm Jackie Nunez from Plastic Pollution Coalition, and the one question I always have with these, with the bottled water, in particular right now, the aluminum bottled water, is what is it lined with? And I know, maybe it's different from, clear to sparkling, but I know there needs to be some sort of lining so it doesn't react with the aluminum. So what are you using?
Yeah, so like every aluminum can or steel can, our bottles and cans do have an epoxy lining. It represents less than 1% of the total weight of the package, and it's BPA free.
So what is the epoxy? What is the chemical you're using?
I don't have that information off the top of my head.
Because I looked all over your website, and I think that's something that, if it is BPA free, and I think as customers become more aware, they're going to ask beyond BPA free, and that's it for us who are looking for these things. That's a red flag. That means if it says BPA free, there's plastic in it, and then it's like, what kind of plastic is that?
Sure.
And then you're saying it's plastic free. And so this is my question to you guys too, because you were talking about all these marketing opportunities and everything, but there's a risk in there too. It's capitalizing on this infrastructure that really needs the focus, where we need to really take our water back. And a lot of these companies are extracting water, like the Nestle's and everything, from our own water supplies and reselling it back to us at 2,000%. So if I was a stadium and I was going to do this branded water bottle thing, why don't we just do a branded water bottle and invest in a great filtration system with the proper pipes and have it be this low net energy and have that whole equation. And in the long run, there might be some investment up front, but you'd be saving money and just marketing like crazy, and you wouldn't have this footprint. I mean, aluminum still is a big footprint too. So anyway, so this is what we struggle with, the Plastic Pollution Coalition. We are very business friendly. We're always for solutions, and I think right now in this weird time that we're in, we have to look at all the solutions. But I also think too we need to look beyond that, replacing one single-use item with another. I like that the idea of this bringing it back in the reusable container share program type of thing, and in a closed system like that, like a stadium or a campus, it's doable.
It's an excellent point. Thank you for the question. Excellent. You know who I kind of point my fingers at a little bit, and I like the guys at both these companies, but they're not good at marketing, is LK, ELKAY, and Oasis. They're the two big hydration stations. Terrible at marketing. Nice people. But like, if they had a drinking fountain right there that was more appealing with some marketing or a picture of a river or where the water, or a picture of a player or something like that at the stadium, and this is player's water, and here's your reusable cup, so you don't even need this anymore. You've got your reusable cup with the player's number, and it's got an LK thing with the player right there. You go there, and I talked to those LK and the Oasis guys, and they're just like, I'm not an industry that's received a lot of marketing because they don't need to do any marketing. There's your drinking fountain. You go to the airport, and there's a drinking fountain. You fill it up and you leave. It's a missed opportunity for the Plastic Coalition. They should have maybe an ad for some luxury brand to pay for the whole thing, and then they shouldn't have a nonprofit ad. Plastic Coalition should be right there.
Pollution Coalition.
Sorry, Plastic Pollution Coalition. So there's marketing opportunities.
Yeah.
But not every company has a marketing executive like Joe. And so we need more Joes in all these companies to sort of say, hey, I got a creative idea. Why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? And the guys at these other drinking fountain companies are just like...
Yeah, I was just walking all over campus looking for a
companies.
post office, by the way, and it was in the basement of the student center. I finally found it, and I was so excited because I was like, damn it, I didn't fill up my water bottle on the way out of the...
There's tons of research on
and they had an
hydration
LK there, and I was just thinking about that. Like, these hydration systems, they're not really advertising. They're not really... I mean, this is the reuse system that...
Well, one of the, not to get too far ahead of ourselves here, but the Reigning Champions kind of whole concept and really took off quite well. So now the club actually we're in pretty deep discussions. They will invest to actually take rainwater, run it through on site. We'll clean it constantly, and there'll be powered by rain fountains, if you will, around the stadium, so folks can go there and drink that water in their own containers. And the players are likely to play a role here as maybe my teaser for the day that hopefully you'll maybe a few months from now take a look at what we're doing. But to that point, having but you have to invest. In this case, the club's investing, but there's such a bigger message behind that investment, and that's what's great about this particular club because they see the opportunity, and so they're willing to drive it. But I think it's going to be a really nice home run.
One thing that I did want to add, so one thing that we are very careful not to say is that our product is plastic free, and that's part of being authentic and knowing that every physical product has a footprint. What our product does offer is an option where the material is less likely to end up in a landfill or ocean at the end of use. Cartons themselves, they have sometimes as much plastic as a plastic bag or a plastic bottle itself, wrapped in paper and wrapped in aluminum as well. The recyclability is awful. The national rate is right around 16% for recycling cartons. Another element of what we're doing, so that goes along with knowing that any physical product has this environmental impact, is we're launching a carbon offset program to make our packaging itself, the bottles and cans, carbon neutral, and that'll be something we start next year.
There's one other water bottle that I've heard of called Purist. I don't know if you've heard of it, and it's lined in glass, but not like the thermos glass that we're used to that breaks. It's actually like a lining, almost like I want to believe it's like more like an enamel that's put in there, but they might have used some sort of adhesive. But it's just it's like just this lining, but it's glass, and so it doesn't conduct any odor, and it's really clean. So I think there's something like that. I've been trying to find stuff on their website. I'm just going to contact them.
What is it called?
It's called Purist water bottle. It's a stainless steel water bottle, but it's lined in glass, and it's great. It's more expensive. It's like a $50 water bottle, but yeah, it's that's something I always think of with the aluminum. If there's a way to line it, or if it just kind of bake something in there and do anyway.
In a way that's cost effective as well. Yeah.
Dan?
I just had a question for Joe. Is it Joe or Joseph?
Joe, yeah.
Joe.
Just my mom sticks with Joseph, or did, so
Okay,
after
Joseph.
that, yeah, exactly. I sit up in my chair.
I'm Deanna Cohen from Plastic Pollution Coalition. I just had a question. I mean, I'm really enjoying the video pieces that you shared with us, but I'm still having trouble seeing what the takeaway from them is. Like, I don't actually see a call to action, and so I was curious if you could just talk about that first.
Boy, you really touch on something that we talk a lot about, the call to action. What's the CTA call to action that we have? And so in the kind of in the messaging continuum, if you will, the way we think about it is, first you've got to create the awareness piece, number one. Secondly, then you've got to kind of like double click and educate and inform, you might say. And then the third element would be the call to action. If you think about an audience and any kind of messaging continuum, that's the continuum that is how we think about it. We signed a 4-year deal, and so we also believe, excuse me, you can't move the audience so fast. And so you'll see a lot of the creative right now is in this upfront section of awareness piece and a double click on inform. Reigning Champions was an inform to educate people that solutions exist. We don't want to jump to a call to action, and full openness, we're struggling with because the call to action needs to be simple, yet our world and what the actions need to be aren't so simple, right? The actions that we need to take here in Boston are different than, say, Philadelphia, and certainly different than what's going on in Africa and whatnot. So the one call to action, though, that you will see, and I bring it back to our Watermark Philanthropic and Stakeholder Engagement Program, is we run over 1,000 events. Hopefully in the next couple of years, there'll be 2,000 or 3,000 events. And so you'll see a call to action where we invite the general public to join us to give back around water issues, to join us in the classroom when we educate, to join us when we build a water tower, to join us when we have 50 or 100 employees at a river and we're cleaning up that river. Come on out and work with us and clean up the river. So that'll be one of the easier CTAs that we can actually get after. Beyond that, you get into these discussions around regulatory, around willingness to pay, and all the other things like this, which complicates it a little bit. So I'm just being really open and transparent about, in the creative, what we talk about, but we also a bit of, the audience isn't there yet. Let's really kind of double click on the awareness and the inform piece, and then probably in the next year we can get after the CTA. But it's a great question. And look, if anyone, I love the ideas that we got from the panel. I'm willing and open to hear from anyone on how, if you have a great idea from call to action in terms of what we can do with this partnership, please give me the idea. Hit me afterwards or hit me on email. Love to hear what we can do. So
This industry's thirsty for creativity.
Right. And if I could just end with this, that what's the call to action after this panel, which I think is very important, is hopefully we've outlined to you what's the market opportunity. It's a massive amounts of problems, big market, lots of capital going after it. But the call to action is really everyone here in this room who continue to communicate on this journey, which is going to take a considerable amount of time. The faces of water will change, the people in this space will change, but we really need to do a better job of all communicating together and driving it. It's not going to be driven by your traditional players. It's going to be driven by people that have been outside the norms, operating within what is called water, which again is just this amorphous blob of everything. And so I would encourage every single person here, whether you're going back to your lab at the media center, or you're going back to your classroom, just always continuously try to focus on the solution and take the passion that I think everyone has and is contributing to actually come out there and solve these problems slowly in some cases, quickly in other cases. But there's so many problems to solve, and if we can harness that, I think we'll all be better served in a year, 2 years, 3 years from now for that call to action. So I think with that, I want to thank MIT, the organizers, and I think that concludes this session.
Thanks, Alex, for moderating.
Yeah. Thanks,